Pat Metheny has been quoted as saying, "Someone who knew me when I was 14 said I was the oldest 14-year-old on the planet. Now I'm a 14-year-old who is 60." In an article for Downbeat magazine, Pat Metheny wrote, "The whole idea of developing a personal sound and conception of music has been really important to me right from the beginning. When I think of all my favorite musicians, the thing that they all seem to have in common, in fact, maybe the only identifiable characteristic that they all share, is that they are all true individuals. They are one of a kind. They're all originals. When we think of Miles Davis, Wes Montgomery, Bill Evans, Ornette Coleman, or Freddie Hubbard, within an instant of the mention of their names, we can hear their sound in our heads. But for me, as a young musician growing up, even though this abstract idea of having one's own sound was a beautiful idea, the hardcore reality of working towards that goal has been and continues to be a lifelong process." Metheny has a devotional relationship to music. He dismisses the idea of being talented in favor of disciplined work and is known for practicing the guitar for 6 hours a day. He tours nearly constantly, performing over 200 shows a year. For each one, he spends 4 hours in preparation, he avoids conversation, runs purposely mindless exercises, and abstains from all food. After the show, he writes notes on the performance, critiquing the sound, music, and environment. He has never drank alcohol or used any drugs in order to stay focused. Despite his diligence, Metheny is all smiles. He sports an iconic plumage of rock and roll curls atop his head and has performed at least once in nothing but a Speedo. He is a man who relishes the luck that has graced his life of virtuosity and believes in playing every concert as if it were his last. Patrick Bruce Metheny, born August 12, 1954, is an American jazz guitarist and composer. He was the leader of the Pat Metheny Group from 1977 to 2010 and continues to work in various small combo, duet, and solo settings, as well as other side projects. His style incorporates elements of progressive and contemporary jazz, Latin jazz, and jazz fusion. He has 3 gold albums and 20 Grammy Awards, and is the only person to have won Grammys in 12 categories. Metheny was born in Lee's Summit, Missouri. His father Dave played trumpet, and his maternal grandfather Delmar was a professional trumpeter. Metheny's first instrument was the trumpet, on which he was taught by his brother, Mike. Pat's brother, father, and grandfather played trios together at home. His parents were fans of Glenn Miller and swing music. They took Pat to concerts to hear Clark Terry and Doc Severinsen, but they had little respect for guitar. Pat's interest in guitar increased around 1964 when he saw the Beatles perform on TV. For his 12th birthday, his parents allowed him to buy a guitar, which was a Gibson ES 140. Pat Metheny's life changed after hearing the album Four and More by Miles Davis. Soon after, he was captivated by Wes Montgomery's album Smokin' at the Half Note, which was released in 1965. He cites the Beatles, Miles Davis, and Montgomery as having the biggest impact on his music. When he was 15, Metheny won a scholarship from Downbeat magazine to a 1-week jazz camp where he was mentored by guitarist Attila Zoller, who then invited him to New York City to meet guitarist Jim Hall and bassist Ron Carter. While playing at a club in Kansas City, Metheny was approached by Bill Lee, a dean at the University of Miami, and offered a scholarship. After less than a week at college, Metheny was offered a job as a teacher because the school had recently introduced electric guitar as a course of study. Later, he moved to Boston to teach at the Berklee College of Music with jazz musician Gary Burton and established a reputation as a prodigy. Metheny released his debut album, Bright Size Life, in 1976, with Jaco Pastorius on bass guitar and Bob Moses on drums. His next album, Watercolors, was the first time he recorded with pianist Lyle Mays, who became his most frequent collaborator. With Metheny, Mays, and Gottlieb, the 4th member was bassist Mark Egan when the album Pat Metheny Group was released. The second group album, American Garage, reached #1 on the Billboard Jazz chart and crossed over onto the pop charts. From 1982 to 1985, the group released Off Ramp, a live album, Travels, First Circle, and The Falcon and the Snowman, a soundtrack album for the movie of the same name for which they collaborated on the single This Is Not America with David Bowie. Pat then again delved into solo and band projects, and 4 years went by before the release of the next group record, a live album titled The Road to You in 1993. The group integrated new instrumentation and technologies into its work, notably May's use of synthesizers. With Speaking of Now, new group members were added: drummer Antonio Sanchez from Mexico City, trumpeter Quang Vu from Vietnam, and bassist, vocalist, and guitarist Richard Bona from Cameroon. Outside the group, Metheny has shown different sides of his musical personality. He made the album Orchestrion in 2010 with elaborate custom mechanical instruments, which allowed him to compose and perform as a one-person orchestra. By contrast, his album Secret Story used orchestral arrangements found more often in movie soundtracks. His solo acoustic guitar albums include New Chautauqua, One Quiet Night, and What's It All About. He explored the fringes of the avant-garde on Zero Tolerance for Silence. This too was an album of solo guitar, but it was electric guitar. Metheny had ventured into the avant-garde before on Song X with Ornette Coleman. The long list of his collaborators includes Brad Mehldau, Charlie Haden, Chick Corea, Dave Holland, Herbie Hancock, Jaco Pastorius, Jim Hall, Joni Mitchell, David Bowie, and Michael Brecker. In 2012, he formed the Unity Band with Antonio Sanchez, Ben Williams, and Chris Potter. Ornette Coleman's 1968 album, New York Is Now, inspired Metheny to find his own direction. He has recorded Coleman's compositions on a number of albums, starting with a medley of round trip and Broadway blues on his debut album, Bright Size Life. He worked extensively with Coleman's collaborators, and he recorded the album Song X in 1986 with Coleman and toured with him. It is one thing to attain popularity as a musician, but it is another to receive the kind of acclaim Metheny has garnered from critics and peers. Over the years, Metheny has won countless polls as Best Jazz Guitarist and awards, including 3 gold records for Still Life, Letter from Home, and Secret Story. He has also won 20 Grammy Awards in 12 different categories, including Best Rock Instrumental, Best Contemporary Jazz Recording, Best Jazz Instrumental Solo, and Best Instrumental Composition. The Pat Metheny Group won an unprecedented 7 consecutive Grammys for 7 consecutive albums. Metheny has spent most of his life on tour, averaging between 120 and 240 shows a year since 1974. At the time of this writing, he continues to be one of the brightest stars of the jazz community, dedicating time to both his own projects and those of emerging artists and established veterans alike. Metheny is the younger brother of jazz flugelhornist Mike Metheny. He lives in New York City with his wife Latifah and their 3 children. This is Brian from One Track Jazz. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe.